Unaware she controlled half the kingdom's wealth, the mistress poured wine on the wife and got what she deserved. The great spring banquet of Lysandria was meant to celebrate renewal, prosperity, and the forging of new alliances. Yet on that particular evening, beneath the glittering chandelier of 1,000 candles, the palace of Blackridge seemed determined to celebrate something else entirely: the slow public destruction of Lady Seraphina Valehart, the Duchess no one bothered to respect. The hall was alive with music, laughter, and silk swishing across marble floors. Noble women flaunted jewels heavier than their husbands' honor, while lords compared titles and lands they barely managed. No one paid attention to the quiet figure standing near the far column, her pale gown almost blending with the ivory stone. Lady Seraphina had always been a woman of quiet elegance, soft-spoken, graceful, and dignified even when dignity cost her everything. Her marriage to Duke Draven Blackthorn had once been celebrated as the perfect union. People whispered that she would bring grace to the house, that she would strengthen alliances with her noble lineage, that she would become the jewel of Blackridge. Instead, she became its shadow. Draven, who once held her hand before crowds, now stood at the center of the banquet hall with a woman draped over his arm. A woman the court adored for all the wrong reasons. Lady Morelle Revance, young, arrogant, and beautiful, in the dangerous way of people who had never suffered consequences. Seraphina's eyes lowered, not out of shame, but out of exhaustion. She had grown used to the court's cruelty, the whispers that followed her, the servants who obeyed Morelle as though she already were Duchess. It had been months since Draven even addressed her with anything other than bored irritation. Tonight was different, though. Tonight, Seraphina felt the weight of something approaching. Something heavy. Something final. "Look at her," Morelle murmured loudly, her voice dripping with disdain as she and Draven approached. "Trying so hard to look important. Poor thing doesn't realize she blends in with the walls." Laughter erupted around them. Seraphina did not move. Draven smirked and pulled Morelle closer. "Seraphina is used to it. She knows her place." The words were meant to provoke, and they did. They stirred a ripple through the crowd, noblemen leaning forward, noble women hiding malicious smiles behind jeweled fans. Then Morelle did what no one expected, but what everyone would retell for years. With exaggerated grace, she lifted her goblet of wine, rich, red, and gleaming like fresh blood, and stepped toward Seraphina. "Let me help you stand out tonight, my lady," she said. And before anyone could react, Morelle poured the wine over Seraphina's head, soaking her gown, her hair, her shoulders. The liquid dripped down her face, staining her pale dress crimson, as the music halted and gasps filled the hall. For a moment, time froze. Seraphina stood still, her breath caught somewhere between disbelief and pain. The hall erupted into a flurry of whispers. "She deserves it. She's too meek. That mistress is bold. What humiliation." Draven folded his arms, watching his wife from above as though observing something pathetic. "Seraphina," he said, his voice cold and loud enough for the entire hall. "If you knew how to behave among important people, things like this wouldn't happen." Morelle pressed herself against him triumphantly. A few servants looked away in shame. Most nobles simply waited for Seraphina to break, to shatter in front of them like fragile glass. But she didn't. Instead, Seraphina slowly lifted her chin. Her eyes, calm, steady, and impossibly composed, met Morelle's, and then Draven's. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for proving to everyone what I already knew." Morelle blinked. "And what is that?" Seraphina's voice sharpened with an iciness no one had ever heard from her. "That filth belongs in your hands, not mine." A gasp ran through the hall. For the first time, Morelle's smirk faltered. Seraphina turned and walked out, her gown dripping like a trail of dark roses behind her. She didn't wipe her face. She didn't tremble. She left the hall with the composure of a queen walking away from peasants. Only one person followed her with their eyes. Lord Alistair Crowe, the king's chief financial advisor. He watched her leave, and for the first time all night, he smiled. "They have no idea," he murmured to himself. "They humiliated the woman who controls half the kingdom's wealth, and at dawn, they would all kneel." The morning after the banquet dawned with an eerie stillness. For the first time in years, the castle of Blackridge did not echo with servants' chatter or nobles' gossip. Instead, there was a strange tension in the air, the unmistakable calm before a storm. And that storm arrived with the sound of royal trumpets. Horns pierced the silence from beyond the gates, sending a ripple of panic through the staff. Servants rushed toward the windows, whispering, "Are those the king's men? Why would the crown send an escort here? Did the duke commit some offense?" Even Draven, bleary-eyed from a night of indulgence with his mistress, snapped to attention when soldiers in white and gold armor marched into the courtyard. "What in the name of Lysandria?" he muttered, adjusting his robe. But his confusion only deepened when the soldiers parted, allowing a tall, stern figure to step forward, cloaked in the deep blue of the king's highest advisors. Lord Alistair Crowe, the same man who had watched Seraphina leave the banquet with quiet calculation. Draven forced a smile. "Lord Crowe, what a surprise. To what do I owe this honor?" Alistair didn't even glance at him. His cold, unwavering eyes searched the courtyard until they found Seraphina, standing at the far end, dressed in a modest lavender gown, her hair braided neatly down her back. The wine-stained dress from last night was gone, but the memory of the humiliation still clung to the walls. Alistair approached her and bowed, a deep, respectful bow. "Lady Seraphina Valehart," he said, loud enough for every noble, servant, and parasite to hear. "The king summons you." The courtyard erupted in murmurs. Draven stepped forward indignantly. "The king summons my wife? For what purpose?" Alistair turned, his expression colder than steel. "Your wife? That is a title you handle poorly, Duke Blackthorn." Draven clenched his jaw. Alistair continued, "Her presence is required for matters of national importance." Morel, who had slithered into the courtyard to watch the spectacle, scoffed. What national matter could that mousy girl be needed for? Alistair's gaze slid toward her and froze her in place. "The same mousy girl, Lady Morel," he said, "who now controls half the kingdom's wealth." Silence. Utter, breathtaking silence. It felt as though the entire castle inhaled sharply at once. Draven blinked, failing to process the words. Morel's painted smile twitched and vanished. What do you mean?" Draven stammered. Alistair gestured to the soldiers, who opened 2 heavy iron chests. Inside were dozens of sealed documents, crests, maps, and contracts, each one bearing a name the court had forgotten. Valehart. "Per her mother's sealed testament," Alistair announced, "Lady Seraphina Valehart is the sole heir of the 4 richest merchant houses in the realm." He listed them one by one: the silver mines of Shalehart, the Eastern Spice Caravans, the Valehart Maritime Fleet, the largest in the kingdom, the Central Exchange Guild, which handled royal loans. Whispers exploded among the nobles. "That's impossible. She owns the mines? The fleets, too? That's half the kingdom's economy. And the tax routes? Are those hers, too?" Alistair nodded. "Most of them." It was as if the earth itself tilted beneath the Duke's feet. Draven staggered forward, disbelief twisting his face into something almost grotesque. That estate was in ruins when she inherited it. She had nothing. Seraphina's voice cut through the courtyard like silk over a blade. "You never asked what I had, Draven. You only assumed I had nothing." His mouth went dry. Morel sputtered. But she's just a woman? Seraphina finished softly. Yes, one you shouldn't have poured wine on. The murmurs grew louder, fear replacing mockery. Alistair stepped closer to Seraphina. The king requests your immediate counsel. The treasury requires restructuring, and only someone with your resources and intelligence is qualified to assist. Dreven bristled. She is my wife. She answers to me. Alistair scoffed openly now. The king does not summon wives. He summons power. And then he approached Seraphina again, voice low but reverent. Lady Valehart, are you prepared to assume your rightful place? Seraphina exhaled softly. Her eyes scanned the courtyard, the very walls where she had been mocked, belittled, treated as nothing. Now, every knee seemed ready to bend. Yes, she said. I am ready. As soldiers surrounded her with honor, Alistair extended his arm. This way, my lady. Seraphina walked past Dreven, who grabbed her wrist desperately. Seraphina, wait, why didn't you tell me? She looked at him with a coldness that made even the soldiers shift uneasily. Because, Dreven, you never cared enough to ask. Then she pulled her wrist away, and the Duke was left behind, small, powerless, and suddenly painfully aware of his own irrelevance. As the gates closed behind her, the entire castle seemed to whisper the same truth. She wasn't the woman they thought she was. She was the woman they should have feared. The capital of Lysandria was a monument to brilliance and brutality. White stone towers rose like spears into the sky. Banners rippled in the wind, and the harbor below glittered with ships from every corner of the continent. But on this day, the city seemed to hold its breath, as though aware it was about to witness the ascension of someone long overlooked. Seraphina's carriage entered the main thoroughfare under the escort of 20 royal guards. Crowds gathered instantly. That's her. The lady who owns the silver mines. The woman the Duke humiliated last night. No, the woman who will soon own him. Seraphina kept her hands folded in her lap. Despite the whispers, despite the stares, she felt calm, an unfamiliar but welcome sensation. For the first time since her marriage began, she wasn't shrinking. She was unfolding. The palace gates opened with ceremonial grandeur. Standing at the top of the marble stairs was King Aldrich III, a monarch known for his diplomatic brilliance and ruthless memory. He had not forgotten how the Blackthorn family once opposed his reforms. But Seraphina, patient, quiet Seraphina, had always been courteous, respectful, intelligent. He admired that. When she reached the final step, she curtsied deeply. Your Majesty, she said. Lady Seraphina Valehart, the king replied, his tone warm but sharp. Rise. She stood, and Aldrich studied her with a knowing expression. I received word of what transpired at Blackridge, he said, a humiliation committed against one of my realm's most valuable assets. Seraphina didn't flinch. I am not an asset, Your Majesty. I am a servant of the realm. The king smiled faintly. And that humility, my lady, is precisely why I can trust you with what comes next. He gestured to his advisors and guards to step aside, opening a path into the Hall of Councils, where decisions shaping the fate of the kingdom were made. Inside, the hall buzzed with controlled chaos. Maps, scrolls, ledgers, and royal decrees covered the long table. Bankers, generals, and ministers all fell silent when Seraphina entered. Gentlemen, the king announced, allow me to introduce the new royal financial conservator. Gasps filled the chamber. The conservator oversees all major economic decisions, whispered one advisor. But that role has been vacant for 20 years, another protested. Aldrich turned sharply. And now it belongs to the rightful person. Seraphina's throat tightened, not from fear, but from the sheer magnitude of what this meant. The position placed her above every merchant guild, above the treasury minister, above half the court. In a realm where money meant power, she had just become one of the most influential individuals alive. You will, of course, have full authority over trade negotiations, taxation reform, and the expansion of our maritime influence, the king continued. The realm needs stability, and you possess both inheritance and aptitude to provide it. Seraphina bowed her head respectfully. I accept the responsibility, Your Majesty. Aldrich nodded. Then let us begin. Hours passed as she analyzed crumbling ledgers, outdated tariffs, and suspicious debts. Her mind worked like a blade, sharp, precise, relentless. She spotted corruption in places no one had dared to question, and inefficiencies buried under decades of negligence. The advisors stared at her with a mixture of awe and discomfort. She wasn't just competent, she was brilliant. Lord Alistair Crowe leaned toward the king and murmured, "If only the Duke understood the power he chose to belittle." Aldrich's reply was quiet, but cutting. Men like him rarely recognize jewels. They only admire glitter. That evening, after her first day reshaping the kingdom's economy, Seraphina returned to her newly appointed residence inside the palace walls, a luxurious suite once reserved for visiting royalty. She removed her cloak and sank into a velvet armchair, finally alone. It was peaceful. Then came a knock at the door. "Enter," she called. A palace courier stepped inside, bowing deeply. "Lady Valehart, a message from Blackridge." Her heartbeat hardened. She knew the handwriting before she saw the seal. "Draven." Seraphina studied the envelope for a long moment. Then she spoke. "Open it." The courier unfolded the letter and read aloud. "Seraphina, please return home. We can discuss what happened. This has all been a misunderstanding. You should not have left the estate without speaking with me first. Come back so we can resolve this as husband and wife." Draven resolve, husband and wife. As though he had ever treated her as either. Seraphina closed her eyes briefly, then said, "Bring me a quill." The courier handed her one, and she wrote a single line beneath Draven's signature. "The Duchess of Blackridge answers only to the king, not to a man who valued a mistress over his own crown." She handed the letter back. "Return this to the Duke," she instructed. "Immediately." The courier bowed and left. Seraphina stood by the window then, gazing at the glittering capital. The city pulsed with life, vibrant, powerful, and indifferent to those who clung to the past. She whispered to herself, "I was quiet for too long." Because now, Draven would learn something he had never imagined. The woman he underestimated was becoming the force that would undo him. Back in Blackridge, the atmosphere had shifted dramatically. What was once a buzzing hive of arrogance and courtly vanity had become a suffocating pit of fear. Whispers clung to the corridors like cobwebs. Servants walked on tiptoe. And for the first time in years, no one dared utter a careless word about the Duchess. They all knew. They all had heard. Lady Seraphina Valehart was now one of the most powerful forces in the kingdom. And the Duke, well, the Duke was suddenly very, very small. Draven paced restlessly inside his study, the same room where he once laughed with Morel about Seraphina's timid nature, where he mocked the way Seraphina stood in the shadows of gatherings, where he allowed his mistress to flaunt her petty victories without restraint. Now, every echo of those memories tasted like poison. "How could she keep this from me?" Draven snapped as he slammed a ledger shut. "How could she hide that she controlled half the kingdom's wealth?" Morel reclined on a chaise, arms crossed, irritation twisting her painted lips. "She should have told you," she said. "She should have told us. We could have used that fortune." Draven spun toward her, face contorted. "We?" he repeated. "We? You dumped wine on a woman who owns the mines that fund half my armies." Morel's cheeks flushed. I didn't know. You didn't need to know, Draven roared. You should have shown her respect because she was my wife. It was the first time Morel had ever heard anger directed at her. For a moment, her confidence faltered, but only for a moment. She's still just a woman, Morel scoffed. And she won't last. She's too soft to control power. The king will grow bored of her. Draven swallowed hard, trying to cling to that thought. But then came the letters. One by one, messengers arrived carrying sealed notices from every financial institution in Lysandria. Requests for audits, demands for overdue payments, freezing of funds, charges for trade violations, notices of investigation, and worst of all, a royal decree suspending Draven's maritime privileges, all stamped with the same signature, Seraphina Valehart, Royal Financial Conservator. Draven's hands trembled as he read each one. His estate, already struggling, was now suffocating under the weight of laws he had violated for years. Laws he believed no one would ever enforce, because until now, no one cared enough to. But Seraphina did. She cared now, and she had all the power she needed. Morel watched Draven fall apart, panic devouring him. Well, she snapped, pacing. Do something. Do what? He barked. She outranks me now. She outranks all of us. Morel's voice shrank to a whisper. So, she intends to destroy us? Draven sank into a chair, pressing both hands to his face. No, he muttered, voice hollow. She just intends to stop protecting us. The capital reacts. Meanwhile, in the capital, Seraphina moved through marble corridors with a quiet authority that startled even seasoned ministers. Every step she took seemed to shift the balance of the court. Nobles who once avoided her now lined up for a glimpse. Guildmasters bowed so low their foreheads nearly touched the floor. Even generals softened their posture in her presence. She had not spoken of revenge, had not uttered Draven's name since arriving, had not mentioned Morel at all. But the court understood. This kind of silence was dangerous and intoxicating. Behind closed doors, the king asked her, "Do you wish retribution?" Seraphina's answer was simple. "No, Your Majesty, I wish reform." That was the moment the king realized something vital. She wasn't driven by spite. She was driven by purpose. And purpose was far more lethal. The nobles began to switch sides. Word spread fast. Every noble house, terrified of being audited, began to court the new conservator with desperate adoration. Lady Rowan sent a rare set of enchanted quills. Lord Pharaoh gifted an entire vineyard. The Merchant Guild offered her exclusive shares. The High Cleric himself requested an audience to bless her new path. Some even went as far as rejecting invitations from Draven entirely, afraid of appearing aligned with him. Seraphina accepted none of the gifts, but she accepted every audience. She didn't want their offerings. She wanted information, allies, influence. And within days, she had more than Draven had accumulated in a decade. Draven tries to fight back. In a last pathetic attempt at reclaiming dignity, Draven dared to write again, this time begging. "Seraphina, I understand now that I was wrong. I wish to speak with you, not as husband and wife, but as partners. As equals. Let us meet and resolve our differences, for the sake of Blackridge." Seraphina read the letter at her desk in the palace. Her face did not move. Her pulse did not quicken. Her anger did not flare. There was nothing left in her for Draven to wound. She handed the letter to a courier. "Return this," she said, "with a message." The courier bowed. "What message, my lady?" Seraphina met his gaze calmly. "The crown has no partnership with cowards." "Lady Valehart, Royal Conservator." The courier left. Seraphina returned to her ledgers, and Draven felt, for the first time, what true powerlessness tasted like. Morel had always believed she was untouchable. She had beauty. She had charm. She had the Duke wrapped around her little finger. What she didn't have, and never imagined she needed, was power. Real power. The kind Seraphina now wielded with the ease of someone born to rule. The consequences began slowly, like an illness quietly spreading through a household. At first it was merely whispers. Nobles refusing to greet Morel at gatherings. Servants abruptly ending conversations when she entered the room. Influential families withdrawing invitations without explanation. Then the rumors became sharper. Is she the woman who poured wine on the conservator of the realm? What a disgrace. She's lucky she wasn't arrested. No nobleman's daughter behaves like that. Morel tried to laugh it off. They're just jealous, she told herself. They always have been. But the truth settled heavier with each passing day. She wasn't the jewel anymore. She was poison. To be seen with her was to be marked as disloyal to Seraphina Valehart and the crown. And in Lysandria, that was a death sentence. The breaking point came 2 weeks after Seraphina's ascension, the Feast of Golden Harvest. The Duke insisted they attend. "We must show face," he muttered, adjusting his cloak in the mirror. His eyes were sunken. His hands shook. "If we appear confident, people will stop assuming we've lost status." Morel clung to familiar vanity. Of course. Once they see us, they'll remember who the future Duchess truly is. Draven did not correct her. He did not have the strength. They arrived fashionably late, as Morel always insisted. But instead of turning heads in admiration, they turned heads for an entirely different reason. Whispers erupted like fire on dry grass. That's her. The mistress. The shameless one. The one who assaulted Lady Valehart. And then came the blows Morel never saw coming. Noblewomen turned their backs deliberately when she approached. Servants refused to take her cloak. The musicians paused their melody when she walked past, the purest form of social condemnation. Then, as she reached the main hall, a young noblewoman accidentally let a goblet slip from her fingers. The wine splattered at Morel's feet. The room went silent. Morel's breath hitched. The girl lowered her eyes and murmured, "Oh, pardon me. I thought that's what people do to women like you." Laughter exploded around them. Morel froze, the humiliation striking deeper than any blade. This was no accident. This was retaliation. A taste of what she had done to Seraphina. Draven grabbed her arm, his jaw clenched. "We're leaving." The humiliation had finally reached them both. Draven's estate falls apart. Back at Blackridge, chaos blossomed like a disease. Trade routes closed, ships seized by the crown, loans recalled, tenants refusing to pay because the crown was investigating the Duke's accounts. And every document carried the same cold signature: Lady Seraphina Valehart, Royal Financial Conservator. Not by spite, but by duty. Because Draven had been stealing, lying, and cutting corners for years. Seraphina simply removed the shields he once hid behind. His entire household collapsed. Servants fled to avoid being tied to a disgraced lord. Allies withdrew, terrified of offending Seraphina. Even military officers began requesting reassignment. And through it all, Draven's pride slowly shriveled. He wrote 3 more letters to Seraphina, all ignored. He sent a messenger to the palace, turned away. He traveled halfway to the capital, but turned back, too ashamed to face her. He was unraveling, yet the world kept spinning around Seraphina. Seraphina's rise continues. Power did not corrupt her. It clarified her. Each morning she entered the royal council chambers with the quiet discipline of a seasoned general. She restructured tariffs, renegotiated foreign debts, exposed embezzlement, and revolutionized the maritime routes. Within weeks, the kingdom's economy shifted dramatically. Shipyards reopened, merchants prospered, the crown's coffers overflowed, and the people, the actual people, began chanting her name in the streets. Lady Valehart, Lady Valehart. For the first time in many years, the throne had stability. Because of her. Even the king himself remarked during council, if Lady Valehart wished to wear a crown, half the kingdom would bow willingly. Seraphina always replied with the same answer. I want no crown, Your Majesty, only justice. Still, she could not deny it. Power suited her, influence obeyed her, and she had become something Draven could never fathom, a woman feared, respected, and admired at once. Meanwhile, Morel's ruin. As Draven crumbled, Morel's decline accelerated faster. First, she was banned from noble gatherings. Then, from the palace entirely. Then, merchants refused to serve her, afraid of being associated with her infamy. Her beauty faded beneath stress. Her arrogance crumbled under isolation. And worst of all, Draven began avoiding her too. Because without Seraphina, without her wealth, without her influence, Morel meant nothing. You used me, he snarled one night. You encouraged me to humiliate her. Morel raised her chin. You never complained when I was warming your bed. He struck the table. I lost everything. And I'm losing you, she cried. You lost me long ago, he replied bitterly. I only didn't see it. For the first time, Morel understood real fear. Everything that made her powerful had been borrowed, from Draven and from the humiliation of Seraphina. Now both had vanished. A message arrives at the palace one evening. As Seraphina was finalizing a new tax reform, a courier arrived breathless. A message from Blackridge, my lady. The Duke requests an audience. Seraphina didn't even look up. Decline. But, my lady, he begs your forgiveness. Seraphina dipped her quill, her voice steady and dismissive. Forgiveness is a luxury reserved for those who regret. The Duke regrets only the consequences, not the cruelty. The courier bowed. Yes, my lady. She continued writing. She felt nothing. Draven had lost her years ago. He was only now becoming aware of it. The decline of Duke Draven Blackthorn no longer whispered. It roared across the kingdom. No lordship collapses quietly. No downfall happens in secret. And the moment Seraphina stepped into the light of power, Draven was condemned to drown in the shadows he himself had created. By the time autumn's first frost touched the windows of Blackridge, 3 things had happened. 1. The Duke's ships were seized by the crown. 2. His remaining estates were placed under audit. 3. His name appeared on a public list of nobles being investigated for fraud. He was finished. Everyone knew it. Everyone except Draven himself, at least until that final letter arrived. The royal summons. It came with a black seal. Not death, but something close. The parchment was thick, official, and cold to the touch. Draven broke the wax, hands trembling. Duke Draven Blackthorn, you are hereby summoned to the royal capital for an inquiry regarding the mismanagement of estate funds, illegal taxation of tenants, and obstruction of maritime law. You are required to appear before the royal conservator, Lady Seraphina Valehart, in the Council of Lords within 7 days, by order of the crown. Draven felt the world tilt. His vision blurred. The paper slipped from his hands. He had thought she would punish him silently. Administer reforms. Ignore him. Let him rot quietly. But this was public, humiliating, irredeemable. Morel burst into the room moments later, having seen the messengers leave. Well? What did they want? She demanded. Draven stared at her blankly. They want me, he whispered, for crimes. Morel paled. Crimes? What crimes? The crimes I committed, Draven snapped. The ones you encouraged, the ones we laughed about, the ones Seraphina now controls the evidence for. Morel swallowed. but pride was a stubborn parasite. She won't let them punish you. She was your wife. Was, Draven repeated hollowly. And even then, I gave her no reason to protect me. His voice cracked. I threw away the only person who ever wished me well. Meanwhile, in the capital, Seraphina worked late into the night. The council chamber glowed with candlelight, maps and ledgers spread across the long table. The king, 3 generals, and 8 ministers sat around her as she explained the new economic blueprint. Her voice was steady, her mind razor-sharp, her authority unquestionable. When she finished, the king leaned back, nodding. "This will restructure the realm for the next century," he said. "Extraordinary work, Lady Valehart." "Thank you, Your Majesty." Alistair Crowe added, "Your reforms will also, quite legally, hold the Duke accountable." Seraphina's quill paused. This was the question everyone awaited. Would she show mercy, or let the consequences devour him? She answered without emotion. Hold him accountable fully. No anger, no tremor in her voice, no hesitation. The king observed her carefully. "You do not hate him." "No," Seraphina said softly. "Hate implies he still occupies space in my heart." The ministers exchanged glances. Seraphina continued, "I harbor nothing for him now, and nothing is far colder than hatred." The king exhaled. "Very well. The inquiry shall proceed." The public inquiry. The capital swarmed with people on the morning Draven arrived. The streets around the palace overflowed with onlookers and merchants eager to witness the first inquiry led by the new royal conservator. Draven entered the hall with the stiffness of a man walking toward his execution. His cloak was worn, his eyes bloodshot, his pride shattered. Morelle followed behind him, dressed extravagantly to mask her desperation. But the moment they entered, a guard stopped her. "No unauthorized companions." "She's with me," Draven said quickly. The guard didn't blink. "The conservator forbids her entry." Morelle's jaw dropped. "She can't forbid me." "She can," the guard replied, "and she has." Doors closed. Morelle was shut out, and Draven stood alone. Inside, nobles filled the seats in a semicircle. At the center, elevated above them all, sat the royal conservator, Seraphina. Dressed in deep navy velvet, hair braided with silver threads, she looked nothing like the woman he once dismissed in shadows. Her posture commanded presence. Her calmness commanded obedience. She did not look at him. The king opened the proceedings, but it was Seraphina's voice that dominated. "Duke Draven Blackthorn," she said, reading from a ledger. "You stand accused of falsifying shipping records, underpaying crown taxes, and exploiting your tenants." Draven's throat tightened. I didn't know." "You knew," Seraphina said quietly. Her eyes remained fixed on the parchment. "You simply believed you would never be held accountable." A murmur rippled through the chamber. She continued reading, meticulously dismantling him with facts, records, and testimonies. Every lie he ever told, every corner he cut, every cruelty he justified under the comfort of impunity. Draven could not speak. Every time he opened his mouth, the weight of her evidence slammed it shut. At last, Seraphina closed the ledger. "The Crown recommends the following penalties," she said. "Stripping of trade permissions, repayment of stolen funds, and forfeiture of maritime authority." Draven's knees buckled. It was over. The king turned to Seraphina. "And you, royal conservator? What is your final recommendation?" The hall froze. This was her moment, her power, her justice. Seraphina lifted her gaze for the first time. Her eyes met Draven's, and he flinched as though struck. She spoke clearly. "The law should decide his fate, not me." Shock. The hall erupted. She continued, "I will not lower myself to vengeance. He is a citizen of Lysandria, and the law is sufficient." Draven stared at her, broken, breathless, unable to comprehend that the woman he had crushed was now strong enough to deny even the satisfaction of personal revenge. The king nodded. "So it shall be." The hearing adjourned. Seraphina rose gracefully and left the chamber. She never looked back. Morel waited outside the inquiry hall, pacing with fury disguised as fear. Every time the doors creaked, she jerked her head up, half expecting Draven to emerge victorious, half terrified he would not emerge at all. When the doors finally opened, nobles streamed out in tense clusters. Some whispered, others looked pale, a few smirked, but all avoided Morel as if she carried plague. Draven came out last. He moved like a man who had forgotten how to inhabit his own body. His eyes were hollow, his spine bent under invisible weight, his jaw slack with defeat. "Draven!" Morel rushed to him. "What happened? What did that snake do to you? What did she—" He raised a trembling hand. "Enough," he whispered. "No," Morel insisted, gripping his cloak. "Tell me she didn't win." Draven looked at her then, truly looked, and something inside him snapped. "She didn't have to win," he said, voice a mere thread. "I lost before she ever spoke." Morel blinked, confused. Draven closed his eyes. "Seraphina did nothing except stand there and let the truth bury me." Morel's face twisted. "She humiliated us." "No," Draven murmured. "We humiliated her, and the kingdom saw, and the kingdom remembered." He took a step back from Morel. "I can't be with you anymore." The words hit her like a slap. "What?" Morel gasped. "You can't mean that." "You were poison," he said quietly, "and I drank you willingly. But now I see what you helped me become." "I helped you?" Morel shrieked. "You followed me! You loved me!" Draven flinched. "I loved the version of myself who didn't have to face reality. You made that easy." He turned away. Morel grabbed his cloak again, desperation clawing at her voice. "If she thinks she can take everything from us—" Draven spun sharply. "She took nothing," he shouted. "I gave it all away." Morel stumbled back, stunned, as Draven walked down the stairs alone, the weight of his disgrace dragging behind him like a broken chain. It was the last time they ever spoke. The Duke returns to ruin Blackridge did not welcome him. Not with loyalty. Not with pity. Not with anything resembling respect. Servants watched from the shadows, whispering as he passed. "Is that really him? He looks 10 years older." That's what crossing Lady Valehart does. By the time Draven reached his study, he found 3 more letters from the crown, each colder than the last. One detailed the final penalties. Another revoked privileges for 10 years. The last one froze his personal accounts. He collapsed into his chair, buried his face in his hands, and allowed himself to break for the first time. He cried. Not for Seraphina. Not for Morel. Not even for the estate. He cried because he had become a man even he could not respect. Seraphina's new world. While Blackridge crumbled, Seraphina flourished like a garden finally given sunlight. She became the king's most trusted advisor, guiding trade reforms that reshaped the realm. Merchants prospered, soldiers were paid fairly, and corruption trembled in terror of her signature. Noblewomen admired her grace. Noblemen feared her intellect. The common folk blessed her name. When she walked through the capital, children ran to offer her flowers. Merchants bowed as if she were royalty. Foreign ambassadors requested meetings weeks in advance. She did not seek adoration, but she earned it. She moved through life with calm conviction. A woman who no longer needed anyone's permission to exist, to decide, to rise. One afternoon, while reviewing new shipping tariffs, the king visited her private office. "You've changed the realm," he said, watching her work. Few women have ever held this much influence. Seraphina looked up with a serene smile. I did not seek power, Your Majesty. Only dignity. Aldrich studied her thoughtfully. You are a symbol now. A hope for many women who suffer the same fate you once did. Seraphina exhaled softly. Then may they learn what I learned. Suffering should sharpen us, not silence us. The king smiled. The world learns the truth. Word of the inquiry spread far beyond the capital. Peasants, merchants, and nobles alike retold the tale with admiration. The humiliated wife who rose to power. The mistress who fell from grace. The duke crushed under the weight of his own sins. The woman who owned half the kingdom and still chose justice over vengeance. The story became legend, a warning, a promise, a victory every woman whispered about in secret. Seraphina's final choice. Weeks later, while visiting the countryside to oversee repairs to a collapsed trade route, Seraphina paused near a quiet hill overlooking the Valehart estates, the lands her mother had left her. The wind carried the scent of pine. The sky stretched endlessly overhead. She felt free. A messenger rode up the hill. My lady, he said, bowing deeply. A final request from Duke Blackthorn. Seraphina's eyes remained fixed on the horizon. What does he want? She asked. He requests one meeting, the messenger said, to apologize. Seraphina closed her eyes, not in pain, in clarity. Tell him, she said, that apologies are for those seeking reconciliation. And you do not wish to reconcile? The messenger asked tentatively. No, Seraphina replied. There is no future to rebuild, only a past to leave behind. The messenger bowed and departed. Seraphina remained on the hill for a long time, letting the breeze wash over her. She thought of the woman she used to be, quiet, overshadowed, tolerated. She thought of the banquet, the wine, the humiliation. And then she thought of now, the power, the dignity, the freedom she had carved for herself with her own hands. Finally, she whispered into the wind. I owe him nothing, not even forgiveness. She turned away from the past for the last time and walked toward a future that belonged entirely to her.